Okay, AP Psychology class, we are on our fourth and final installment for our Unit 8A videos on motivation and emotion. And so part 4 is going to talk about sexual orientation and the need to belong. And then our next video will delve into Unit B when we talk more about the theories of emotion rather than motivation, and get into the differences between expressed and experienced emotions and stress management. So that is coming up soon. But for now, let's finish up Unit 8A by looking at sexual orientation. The statistics are roughly 3 to 4% of men and 1 to 2% of women are going to align their sexual orientation against the social norm, right? Being labeled as gay, lesbian, bisexual. But honestly, the fear of discrimination in our culture might lead those statistics to be somewhat of an underestimate. The thing to keep in mind, however, and this isn't something to debate or argue in class, it is what it is, that the majority of these individuals will tell you, in addition to research in the field of psychology, that sexual orientation is neither willfully chosen nor willfully changed. And so oftentimes, in I'm using finger quotes now, debates concerning sexual orientation, that is sometimes something that is tried to throw out there, like why would somebody choose to do this, to align themselves with an orientation other than the social norm? It's like, well, nobody chooses to do that. I don't ever remember making a conscious choice of being heterosexual. So the same would apply for the, others that are homosexual. Okay, so there are some differences, though, concerning attraction when we talk about males versus females. It seems as if, and again, not a ton is known about this yet or can explain why, but it seems as if male sexuality is more static than females. Right, so a female sexuality tends to be more fluid. Like an example, like a high sex drive in men is usually defined as an increased attraction to either females or males, while for women, it's often defined as an increased attraction to men and women. Like the distinction for females isn't necessarily there. And so a lot of times, like concerning like statistics and the understanding of sexual orientation, the same ideas may not apply as well to explaining male sexual orientation as to women, as a result of that plasticity. Concerning environmental factors, a big old question mark. As of right now, we don't really understand a connection between sexual orientation and environmental factors, which is interesting because the majority of issues we've discussed in psychology class have been this biopsychosocial event. And we honestly don't know if there is a connection between like environmental factors that are influencing sexual orientation. So for now, it seems to primarily be biological in nature. I'm sure that environmental factors probably play a role in an individual's expression of their sexual orientation. But as for causing one's sexual orientation, we have no real connection to any environmental factors. The biological factors, here's your explanation for that second bullet of this being neither willfully chosen nor willfully changed. We have, concerning the brain, I guess to back it up, there are examples of homosexuality in the animal world, which will show possible biological connections here between sexual orientation in individuals. Simon LeVay does research on brains and finds different size cell clusters in our hypothalamus, right? And so gay men and straight women have similar looking brains, hemispheres being of similar sizes. Lesbian women and straight men have larger right hemispheres. And so with LeVay's work in the different size clusters of the hypothalamus, and also looking at the different sizes of brain hemispheres, we do see brains looking different dependent upon one's sexual orientation. Genetically, homosexuality seems to run in families. The genetic work in labs has been able to manipulate genetically female fruit flies so that they act male. And so, again, the more that we begin to understand about genetics, maybe a more detailed explanation can be given, but the connection, there's definitely research to support the connection. Concerning hormones, there's not much difference in adult level hormones, between the heterosexual and the homosexual adult. However, we do have research that supports that prenatal hormone levels have been linked to homosexuality. And so these hormone levels probably relate back to what LeVay found as he studied brains, and that these hormone levels probably are affecting the development of the hypothalamus in the 2nd and 5th months of pregnancy. And so there may be some connection there as to biologically why sexual orientation it just seems to be there and doesn't seem to be a conscious choice. An example of the hormones that we see as it manifests itself in later life is what's known as autoacoustic emissions. Those are really just the faint sounds that come from our ear, and your sensitivity to these seem to be affected by hormones during prenatal development. And so hearing sounds coming from your own ear tends to be something that women pick up with better than men. However, lesbian women seem to have levels of autoacoustic emissions that are more similar to men, and likewise, gay men seem to have levels more similar to women. And so, there's just a manifestation of the differences in hormone levels during prenatal development, and maybe, the beginnings of some further research on that subject. All right, and so to wrap up, Unit 8A on theories of motivation, Myers ends with this discussion of belongingness. And so, why do we seek out these relationships with other people? Obviously, from that initial motivational theory, right, the instinctual or the evolutionary psych perspective, belonging with others aided in our survival. We also know from sociology, right, or social psychology, that extreme social isolation in human infants has a lasting damage to them, and even death in some cases. And so clearly humans are not solitary animals. And this the motivation to want to belong and to form relationships means that we were more likely to survive as a species. Wanting to belong is this, again, probably related to aiding survival. But I love that Myers discusses Ubuntu, which is, an African philosophy of, my humanity is caught up, right, is inextricably bound up in yours. And that, again, there's no way that humans could function as a species without taking others into consideration. And so this is, this again, maybe wanting to belong. Maybe it's not really a choice. It's just, something that, is inherent in all of us. Concerning sustaining relationships, it seems to be that things that are familiar to us are what are desired. And so I often, like, we'll talk about this more when we get into the social psychology unit at towards the end of the year. But the whole notion that, right, opposites attract and things of that nature, not really. Like, we like being with like-minded people, and so when it comes to lasting relationships, that's something that we desire. It is familiarity. We also know that in concerning sustaining relationships, that's something that we've learned from an early age. And so, like in the case of foster children, sometimes have a difficult time forming a lasting relationship with individuals as a result of not having that sort of modeling at a young age. So it's like what we're used to is what we desire, and it's critical to have those relationships at a young age. And we clearly know that being ostracized is painful for people. As a parent, that's why time out works so well as a form of punishment, in that you know children don't want to be by themselves. We know that cyber ostracism has led to lots of young adults doing very tragic and sad things as a result of being ostracized. We also know that ostracism can lead to activation in your anterior cingulate cortex in the brain, which is this, ironically, it's the same part of your brain that would be activated in the response to being physically injured. And so, being emotionally hurt, that's why we use the same word. It hurts us to not feel a sense of belongingness. And so there is the end of Unit 8A. Please bring any questions that you may have with you to class. Thanks.